SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, we are continuing our discussion on stone and different kind of uses of stone in this week or in this module. So we have ended our discussion in the last lecture, and that with the dolmen structures or with the burial structures, in which we have seen that how the snake hood like resemblance was created with these blocks of stone, or like how the umbrella like form was created to show reverence towards the deceased one. So those things we can also see that how those kind of structures to show reverence, to pay respect to the ancestors or to the deceased one, had also contributed towards making the structures which are later on they are part of the formalized religions. So for example, we have already looked into some of the Buddhist architectural structures as well as the Hindu temples, and in both temple and in the Buddhist structures, for example the stupas, we see that there is a kind of a vertical growth, and there is a tremendous importance towards marking a sacred space where the where the structure sort of is projected out of the horizontal plane. So the vertical projection of the structures on the horizontal plane is something that we see they have started from this from before the time we find the temples or the stupas came into existence, and how there this resonance or the essence of this kind of practices of of erecting something vertically at a site which is significant to a community is something that remained even in both these religions. I would say that in the other religions as well. So for the Buddhist stupa, as we know that this particular idea of stupa is it translates into making a piled up form. So pile, that means that there are different kind of objects, perhaps they are piled up and then they turn into this form which is called stupa, and that is the reason what we can see that this piled up form which also closely resembles this South Indian burial sites, like the ones with made of this like the ones which are like dolmens, or this umbrella form which we have already looked into. So that kind of shape having this vertical growth on a site which is revered by the entire community or a family, that is something we find that to be reflected in the making of stupa as well. So is the same kind of strategy one can see that how that also affects the making of the Hindu temple. Perhaps there is also a a crucial difference between them. So in the Hindu temples we find that it is definitely it is showing reverence, or it is showing respect towards the deity, but the thing is that it is not always associated with memorial. It is not always associated with the bodily remains of the ancestors or the deceased one, whereas in the Buddhist structure and in this ones, like for example the stupas that we find, the prominent stupas that we have in our country, mostly they contain not either the bodily remnants of Buddha himself or the important Buddhist monks and nuns. So that kind of differences and the similarities one can draw between the earlier burial structures, the Buddhist stupas and the Hindu temples. So those kind of things one can see, and one can think that how certain kind of practices have continued even out of their context, and certain kind of practices were transformed with time when the context became different. So from there I wanted to focus more on how the stones, different kind of stones are used and how different kind of stones are utilized. Now if we think about the way in which the stone is used, so a block of stone one can imagine, and then whatever the stone is, usually while making sculptures or while making architectural fragments, what one does is that, I mean, in the block of stone of the artisan's choice, the sculptor's choice, then we find that, I mean, that is marked with some kind of drawing material. So that can be charcoal, that can be some kind of graphite based or carbon based material, that can be some kind of grease based material, and then the initial drawings are made on the rough stone surface, and then once the drawing is made, according to that the chunks of stone are carved out of that entire outside of that image area where the drawing has been done, and then the drawing is further developed, and then the development of those drawings, then we find that how those drawings have been made into three-dimensional form. So first, like, I mean, the large chunks of the stones are removed for the basic shape, different kind of hammers and chisels of different width and different shape, those are also used for carving the broader areas from carving the smaller details, and that is how we find that the finally how the stone is that starts from those rough drawings and rough surface, they are made into the sculptures or architectural fragments, and the sculptures which look lifelike, which come very close to the way we understand human beings and animals and so on. So here we have examples of Mathura sandstone. So Mathura sandstone is perhaps one of the most celebrated stones that we find in the Indian subcontinent, and from as early as from the Kushana time period, we find it had been used profusely for making different kind of sculptures, and sometimes we also find they were used for making architectural structures as well. So here we have the image of a crowned bodhisattva. So crowned bodhisattva, we can see that, I mean, what is specific about the crowned bodhisattva, but before that let me just focus a little bit more on the characteristic of sandstone. So sandstone is something that is made of the quartz crystals. The quartz crystals are sedimented over time, and then that is how they with the pressure and with the heat, those are transformed into stones. So that is the reason, since they are sedimented and they are formed with an extended period of time, that is the reason we find that to be relatively softer compared to few of the other stones that we will study as part of this course, that is part of this week. So what happens in terms of the sandstone, since it is sedimented, in some sandstone we find the layers of this sedimentation are somewhat like, I mean, distant, and that is the reason the pores within the layers are created. So in when there are more pores, we find that, I mean, that to be more brittle, that is more it may be soft, and also that, I mean, if there are more pores, that can absorb water from the atmosphere, from its surrounding, and if it absorbs more and more water, then it eventually breaks down. So that is not something that is desired for making sculptures or even architecture. So choice of the stone, it is not just about craftsmanship on the stone, but the stone itself is also something that is very important and crucial part of what we are going to produce. So if someone puts much effort in terms of making a sculpture like this, that the one we have on screen, but if the material doesn't support the process, then what happens is that the entire thing just breaks apart. So that is the reason understanding all these material qualities of stone, and if we are looking at sandstone, then thinking about this soft sandstone or the hard sandstone, or like, I mean, the ones which are more porous. So all these characteristic features is very important. So then only one can proceed with the work, and then one can think that, I mean, how the work will be the work will have a longer time span or not. So here what we have in this particular sculpture is this, we see that this very characteristic Mathura red sandstone is utilized for making this sculpture. And in this one, what we have is this in the crown Bodhisattva, there is on the crown, as Bodhisattvas, as I have already mentioned, that they are the ones who are considered to be they are treated as the royals, and they are the ones who have the knowledge of Bodhi, but they decide to stay on earth so that they can be of help to the other human beings who are on the path of enlightenment. And that is the reason the Bodhisattvas are considered the ones who have much compassion for the humankind, the compassionate ones. So here what we have in this figure of Bodhisattva is this, there is this the crown that it wears. And this crown, it has the decoration, and on the top of that usually there is an image of Buddha on the top of that here, and that is also something that we find that to be diligently followed as part of the iconography. So the Buddha being the spiritual master of the Bodhisattva, that is placed on the top of the crown there for Bodhisattvas. So, and then in terms of the other iconographical traits, what we find here is this, how this eyes are created by following these iconographical traits of making it as a bow, and then on the top of that here is this particular sign that is called Urna, and Urna is this sign of the tuft of hair that Buddha had. So that is something that has been stylized in the later times and made like a circle, but I mean that is basically, which is also a sign of the Chakravartin or Buddha. So that is something that we find here as well. And then of course the eyes, we find them to be half closed, and they are done with great care so that the eyes of this compassionate being are expressed in their full glory. And then we also see that, I mean, it has its flowing hair locks, which is not always found in the Bodhisattva sculptures, but here we certainly see that there is much stress or much importance that is given on this flowing locks of hair that we have on his shoulder. So this is also something that we find that in the where this sculpture is preserved today in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So they consider that how this particular way of like it's flowing hair on the shoulder, it can also be considered to be as a response to the image of the Jaina Tirthankara Rishavanatha. So Rishavanatha, this Jaina Tirthankara, is someone who also is identified with his flowing hair, and something that we usually do not see in the Bodhisattva sculptures, but here we do see. So it can be a response to the Jaina image, as the museum claims. In terms of the other details, what we find here is the elaborate jewelry that the Bodhisattva wears, and starting with its broad necklace, the necklaces, and then this thread that sort of like runs from his left shoulder to the right waist, and then of course there are other threads which are also there that can be made of pearls or other jewels. So these are all these different kind of details that we find, starting with the eyes, then all the the ups and downs of the lips, this slight smile which is created in his face, and from there to the details of the hair, and then the necklace, the crown, and everything. So if those are the kind of details that we see, but there are also some of the surfaces, for example the body, the upper part of the body, the torso that we have here, where there are not much of these details, but what we have, that there is a perfect balance between the surface which has been smoothened, and then and not too many of the details have been done there, whereas like in the ornaments all those details are created. So, the broad surface, the uniform surface and the detailed surface, these two kind of surfaces are kept side by side, and that is how the the overall impact of this sculpture is created. In the right side, I also wanted to show this other the back view of the same sculpture, where it shows, where it perhaps also sort of emphasizes the material quality of this sculpture. So, where we see that the freckle marks on the stone, which is also which is part of the identity of this Mathura sandstone, is much more pronounced, and there one can see that how the surface has not been carved the way it has been carved for the front side, and that is how we can observe more of the characteristic of this particular sandstone. From there we move on to another use of the sandstone, and that is perhaps the Chunar sandstone, again not very far from Mathura and in the northern Indian plains on the bank of river Ganges. And what we have here, and Chunar is not that far from the city of Varanasi or Sarnath, and what we have here is the image of a Buddha which was found from Sarnath in Uttar Pradesh. So, this is an image which has been long considered to be a classical representation of Buddha. The time period, that is 5th century, and that is usually in the northern India, that is understood as the time which was when the Gupta dynasty was ruling the parts of northern India. So, what we have here is this, in the monastery, or perhaps in the site of Sarnath, this image along with the Ashokan pillars and the stupas, those were created, and is the same site. Of course, that one can think that when the Ashokan pillar was created in the 2nd century BC, from that time there were continuous reverence of these sites, and later on more and more sculptures and architecture were added, and this one was created in the site of Sarnath in the 5th century. So, what we see here is that how the how Chunar sandstone is used here for making the image of Buddha preaching his first sermon. So, this particular way in which one can see that he places his both hands. So, this is something that is called as turning the wheel of law, and that is the reason this particular mudra, or this hand gesture that we have here in this image, is called Dharma Chakra Pravartana Mudra. And in this one, what we have, that this Buddha is not shown here to be reassuring the devotees by his Abhaya Mudra, or like he is not being the benevolent one, or like granting boons, but he is shown here to be representing this particular historical moment when he first taught his sermon, or like he first turned the wheel of law. So, that is something that is we find here to be very significant. So, what all we see in this sculpture, and then we will come into the discussion of why this is considered to be the classical sculpture and by whom. So, in this sculpture what we have is this very peaceful image of Buddha, and with this slight smile in his face, and then of course, the other details, for example, the urna, that is the tuft of his hair in the forehead, and then the ushnisha, or like the head which had actually projected outward after he attended Bodhi. So, all those characteristic features along with his long earlobes, those are also very prominently projected here, and then of course, the hand gesture to show Dharma Chakra Pravartana, all those things we find them to be present here, and the fabric that sort of drapes his body, the textile, is almost diaphanous, that it's almost see through, that it almost looks like he is nude except the folds and some parts of the the entire area that suggests that there is a textile. Apart from that, there is almost like almost no traces of it. Now, apart from the body, what all we see here is that he is sitting in a highly ornamented throne, and this throne is also something that is of high relevance, because there are two lions that we find in the two sides of this throne. And as we have already discussed, that I mean, Buddha, another name of Buddha is Shakya Simha, and that means like the Simha or the lion of the Shakya clan. So, Buddha came from this Shakya clan, and here, since he is considered to be the Shakya Simha, so he is enthroned on this Simhasana. So, Simhasana we also find that to be reserved for the royalty, but for his this particular association, we find that Buddha is also placed on this Simhasana. And then at the bottom register here, what we have, there are devotees, and then there is the wheel of law at the center that we find, and then there are two deers that we have on two sides who are flanking the wheel of law. So, these are the signs of the these are the signs which commemorate his first sermon in the deer park in Sarnath. So, in Sarnath, in the deer park area where it was, of course, I mean, one can imagine that this is a place which was inhabited by deers, Mrigadava forest, and so that is the place where he first taught his sermon, and that is the reason it had been commemorated by showing this wheel of law at the center. And then we have devotees in both the sides with architectural pillars here. So, all these different things are carved out of this sandstone here. Now, apart from what we have in the bottom register and on the two sides, then there is this ornamented halo that we have here, and in one hand it looks like that this is part of the Simhasana, that it is like a backrest where Buddha is sitting, but on the other hand this can also be considered to be the halo behind his head, because he is a divinity. So, this sort of like, I mean, serves both these purposes. And this halo that we have here, it the central part of the halo is blank, it is just like smoothened and carved with no other details, and then the fringes, the borders, they are elaborately carved in low relief. So, this is something we have, and then on the two sides, in the upper ends here and here, there are two celestial beings that we find, the flying celestial beings who do not walk or run, but they fly, and they are greeting Buddha for his achievement. So, this is what we have in this sculpture, and then the reason why we also find this to be significant is this really careful, at the same time playful, elegant balance between the surfaces which are kept unadorned, like the body and everything, and then the surfaces which have elaborate ornamented motifs, for example, the halo, the Simhasana, and so on. If we also see the way these are carved, then we find that the halo, the entire halo has been carved with a very low relief, so that the lines are there, but they are not really disturbing the contour lines of Buddha's body. So, the contour lines of Buddha's body that we have here, they are carved in high relief, and that is the reason they have this very prominent visual presence in this sculpture here. So, the halo, even though it has much of detail, the ornamental details, they are not carved in such high relief, so that they do not overpower the surface of Buddha's body. The same can be said about the surface that is there right beside Buddha's body here. This two stylized lions. So, they are also carved in somewhat low relief or medium relief, so that, I mean, they contrast the unadorned part of Buddha's body, but also they do not overpower. for the amount of details that has gone into it. So, this very balance between the details, the ornamentation, at the same time keeping this unadorned part of Buddha's body. So, this balance between all of them, they make this sculpture really relevant, and at the same time they also that is something that make this sculpture relevant, and also it has been studied over the period of time. So, during the colonial period, that we find that this particular kind of orientation, where the balance between two different kind of carving, the ornamentation, and creating the anatomy, following the human anatomy, and then making the expression in Buddha's face and everything else, those things were closely compared to the ones we find in the Greco-Roman context in Europe. And also, since this Chunar sandstone, that it is gray in color, which is very close to the use of the way it appears like marble. So, for all those reasons, during the colonial period, we find the scholarship suggested this sculpture and the other ones which were created during the Gupta period in northern India. Those are the ones which are considered to be the classical ones, which resemble closely to the classical Greco-Roman sculptures. However, those views have been also challenged, and then what we find that there were many different regional styles they have simultaneously developed during this Gupta rule. And there are many regional rulers, there are many regional commanders. They have taken this style of execution to different levels. So, it is not really that one can imagine, one can call this is the classical style, and after that whatever came, they have shown degradation. So, this is contextual in its own right, and this is appreciated for its own characteristic features, but that does not mean the ones which were created in the other context or during the other time period are any of less merit. So, this is how we find that how the use of stone has been incorporated for conveying different kind of ideas about the details, the surface, the expression, and the underlying philosophy. Everything comes together by the means of making the Buddha image. Thank you.